Hi, welcome. This is a Kalika tutorial on using Illustrator, and we're going to start with the basics, and then we're going to be working with our shape drawing tools and using the Pathfinder window and some other cool tools I've recently discovered to change this sketch here over to this design. Okay, it's going to be pretty fun. We're going to start off just talking a little bit about Illustrator. Now, why would you use Illustrator instead of Photoshop? I mean, Photoshop's a great program, right? It's fairly easy to use. It's user-friendly, it's beautiful, and you can get all kinds of wonderful textures. Well, the advantage of working with Illustrator is that not only can Illustrator work with vector files, which are math-based, but it can also output those as PDF, as Illustrator, as EPS, as SVG. So that makes it a really great software for when you're doing UI UX design, for when you're doing any kind of graphic that needs to be infinitely scalable. When you create vector graphics that don't have embedded photos or embedded textures or anything that is not vector, you can make it as big as you want. And by as big as you want, I mean like sky's the limit. It could be a poster that you designed at like 5 inches by 7 inches on paper, and then it could be as big as the side of a building. Okay, like you could literally expand it to that big, and you wouldn't have to redo the artwork. You would just make it bigger. It's kind of amazing. And that's because vector artwork is based on math. So let's talk a little bit about what can be done with Illustrator. And I have here some really beautiful examples that I pulled off of Dribbble, D-R-I-B-B-B-L-E. And I'm just going to go through these in order because otherwise I'm going to get lost. So this one here is from Jillian Levine, and I think it's just absolutely beautiful. She has some textures involved, sure, but that could have been added later on. You can actually take artwork that you create in Illustrator and put it into other programs like InDesign, Photoshop, After Effects, and you can continue to work with it in those other programs to add texture, to add motion, and so on. So this one was most likely done in Illustrator, and then the texture was added later on in a program like Photoshop. So this one's pretty nice example. Next, we have Tristan Krompawiro. And I love this. This is what's known as a triptych because it has 3 different panels that all together form a unified piece. And the color palette is really limited. Tristan's only using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 colors, which is amazing that Tristan was able to get this breadth of design out of such a limited palette. It's really quite beautiful. Hi Naya, nice to see you. All right, so this one is by Tristan Krompawiro, and I'll link you guys to all of the illustrators that I'm showing in the description after the stream. Okay, so then we have, oh look, then we have this piece, which is by Dan Stein, and this is just a still image. Oh, hi John, nice to see you. This is just a still image pulled from a really beautiful animation that Dan Stein did. It was on Instagram. I highly recommend you check out Dan Stein. He's got gorgeous stuff. It's just really, really beautiful and dynamic. And again, really limited color palette. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4 colors going on, and this was most likely created in Illustrator. Then we have this figurative piece. This was also most likely made in Illustrator. This is by Daria Semenova, and it just has so much going on here. It's really beautiful. I mean, look at how the composition just like draws you up into the face, even though the face is up in the sky. All of the lines of the composition just really pull you right into it. And again, there is some texture, but that texture was most likely added to the piece after the fact. It was most likely added in Photoshop. And then we have this one, which was made by a group called Infographic Paradise Design, which sounds like some sort of thing that I just made up, but it's not. And I love this because it's made out of just really simple geometry, and yet it's a snake and some cool designs, maybe the snake's eggs off to the side. And then this one's by Kemal Sanli, and again with the really simple color palette and using very strong geometrics to create this really beautiful yet simple design. We've got some checkerboard, we've got some zigzags, we've got some things that look like Legos, we have some concentric circles. Then we have this one by Neo Geometric, and you can already kind of see this one animated again with the really simple geometries, and they definitely took those geometries and they split them up. Like they cut them into component parts, and then they were able to make some clever stuff out of them. I mean, this is super simple. Think about it. It's just two circles that are, one's yellow, one's red, and then we have a white circle. And the yellow and red circles were cut in half and then just moved off from each other. Like simple yet effective. And then we have this one. So this is one of my favorite illustrators. His name is Owen Davey. You can check him out on Instagram. Owen Davey Draws is his handle, and he just does some really cool stuff. So he teaches a great little course on Domestika. That's Domestika with a K, and it walks you through his illustration process, which is really quite remarkably similar to my illustration process, though he's a much more accomplished and experienced illustrator than I am. And then we have this one. This is by Ray Daklam, and simple geometrics arranged in a really clever way. We have some outline things, we have some filled things, and then they're offsetted. And sometimes these geometries are as is. For example, there's a circle tool in Illustrator, and Ray Daklam made these circles and offset them and made them different colors. But then for like this house design, you can combine shapes. Like you could take a square and take a triangle and put them together, or you could take two squares and put them together. If done in the right way by rotating stuff, you could make a house in that sense. Same thing here. You could totally take like a square and then just remove a section of it with an overlapping shape. So today's lesson is going to be all about taking really simple geometries and using them in an overlapped way to cut out from one another and to like combine the shapes to make different shapes and things like that. And we're also going to learn how to make these kind of outlined geometries, these filled geometries, and so on. And finally, we have an example of UI UX design, and undoubtedly this one was originally designed in Illustrator and then probably brought into another program to add things like the rain and to do the whole layout. This kind of a layout, you can do it in, I'm blanking on the name, but there's quite a few softwares that are out there for making this type of thing in UI UX design. Okay, so, and then finally we have this one, which is Shakuro branding, and it's a credit card design. But how cool is this credit card design? We have 3 circles, and then we have a circle with like a little droplet coming off of it, which could have been made by combining a square and a circle together. Then we have a square on top of all of it, and it just like inverts the colors in a different sort of way. So the teal turns blue, the red turns yellow, and so on. And then they added just a touch of texture. You can add texture in Illustrator. I usually add my texture in Photoshop, but yes, it is possible to add texture in Illustrator. So if you have any questions, please drop them into the chat. If you're just joining me now, feel free to say hi so I know that you're here. It's great to see so many of you early on a Saturday morning, like just rip-roaring, ready to learn Illustrator and shapes. Okay, so without further ado, here is what we're going to make in Illustrator. Let me just trim this so that we don't have all the garbage around it. View, trim view. There we go. So we're starting off with this, and I promised you guys crappy sketches, and this is my crappy sketch. Like, it's something that I just drew really quick and scanned it in, and there we go. And then I changed that into this black and white illustration. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some background information that's really going to help you in terms of understanding how Illustrator works. Okay, once we get through the background information, then we're going to dive into the interface. I'll show you all the important stuff about the interface, and then we'll work with the shapes, we'll work with overlapping and building the shapes, and we will dive into this. All right, you guys ready? Okay, cool. So I'm going to make a new document, and you can play along if you like, or you can watch. No preference here. It's all up to how you learn best, okay? And if you're watching the replay, you can always pause and do the thing and then watch it again. There's many different ways to use this. All right, so I'm going to go over to Art and Illustration. And these are all like different categories of presets, like different ways of making Illustrator files. But you can always change the settings afterwards, okay? So don't feel like you're locked in just because you chose something from a template and you have to start all over again. That is not the case at all. Okay, so here's my Art and Illustration, and I'm going to go over to the right and choose 1920 by 1080 just for this like practice example one. Okay, now I like this particular preset because it doesn't have lots of extra stuff all over it. There's no guides, there's no like video safe areas, there's no crosshairs or rulers or anything. It's just super simple. But I do change one thing about it. I go over to where it says points and I change that to pixels. Okay, and then I hit create. Now I primarily work in RGB mode. RGB mode is the mode that I use for television, web, Instagram, anything that I make tends to be RGB unless it's going to print. If it's going to go to print, like to a professional printer, I'll set it to CMYK, okay? And the way that the colors mix is different in RGB versus CMYK, so it's pretty important to decide which color space you're going to use before you really get deep into creating your piece. Okay, so here we have our blank canvas to start working with, and it doesn't autosave for you, so you do have to save your file. And in case if you're wondering, there are work files that I've provided for you guys, including my crappy sketch, and you can download those from the bit.ly link that is in the description of this video. Okay, so here's shapes in the Pathfinder, and I'm just going to save this in here for practice. Okay, and then you're going to get sometimes an "Are you sure?" window, like how do you want to save this, and just leave that at the defaults. See? I told you, the "Are you sure?" window. And I just leave everything at the defaults, meaning Illustrator 2020, 100% on the fonts, all three of these checked on, and then I hit OK. So now it's actually saved as a thing, and then I have some place to save it to. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about that background information, right? What are paths? That's the first one. So a path is basically a shape that you can create in Illustrator that has some information in it, okay? Now, what we're looking at right now, I know it looks white, but it's not really white. So if you go to the View menu and you change this to Show Transparency Grid, you're going to see that our background is actually transparent. There is no real white, okay? So if you're missing Photoshop, that's where you would find it, all right? So I'm going to hide that transparency grid. I'm going to work with my layers panel quite a bit. So if you don't see it over here on the far right, go to the window menu and go to layers there, okay? All right, so next I'm going to show you that whole thing about paths. So when you think of Illustrator, you might think of the pen tool. And the pen tool is kind of like your stereotypical Illustrator tool, right? And with the pen tool, you can draw paths just by like clicking like this, and then eventually you get back to the first one and you click it closed. And it doesn't look like anything right now, and that's because our default colors here are set to a white fill and a black stroke. In addition, that black stroke is like super thin. I know this because when I take my selection tool and I click off of it, see that? That is what you've actually made. When you click on the shape or you hit letter A, you'll see the path points. Now, if you want to make the stroke thicker, you can go over to the properties window. The properties window is like this know-it-all window that tells you all the things about whatever's selected. And then you can just click on the stroke up button over here, and that'll make the stroke or the outline around the thing thicker. Okay? So that's how you would make the stroke thicker. Now, what about the filling? Now, we do have a filling here. It just happens to be white. I'll prove it to you. I'm going to go over to View, and I'm going to turn on the transparency grid, and look at that. We have a white filling with a black stroke and a transparent background. Now, if you want to switch your stroke and your fill colors, you can do that over here. See this little swap fill and stroke button? It lets you switch what is fill and what is stroke. And I'm just using Control Plus on my PC to scale bigger, or sorry, to zoom bigger. That means that we're getting closer to the camera. It doesn't mean that my face is getting bigger. No, my face has not gotten bigger if I'm getting closer to camera. Same idea with zoom. We're just getting closer to the artwork, okay? So that is our shape that we drew, and you can see the white line on the edge, and you can see the filling. And again, that's called fill for the color that's on the inside, and stroke for the color that's making that outline on the outside. And you can swap using this. If you want to go back to your default colors, you can just click on default fill and stroke. Not only will it give you the default colors of white fill and black stroke, but it'll also reset your stroke size to this default 1 pixel super thin line. Okay, now what if you don't want a stroke? Well, or if you don't want to fill, you could set that up down at the bottom here. Okay, so we have the color. So, all right, we have color right now. If I click on gradient, it's going to fill whatever is selected with a gradient. Yeah, that's a tricky thing about Illustrator. If a shape is selected and then you choose one of these things, even if you click on the chip and you're like, yeah, my next shape is going to be like bright red, you know, and you turn it to red, it fills whatever's selected. So whenever you're like done working with a shape, make sure you click off of it and then do your settings and then make your new shape. Okay, so here's my beautiful shape. So I can do, like, depending on which of these chips is overlapping, and you see how it's like kind of overlapping over here, like the white is like on top of the, like the white filling is on top of the stroke. And then when I click like this, you can see that the stroke outline is on top of the fill. And depending on which one's on top, that's how you can adjust here. Okay, so now I can make it a gradient, and now I can just turn off the filling entirely, and I'm just left with the outline. Okay, so if we go back to our examples, if you look at this one by Ray Daklam, that's how they were able to get this outline shape, okay, was by turning off the filling. All right, next, let me just give us a color here. You can fill in the color just by double clicking the color chip, and then you can navigate over here, just making sure that you're in the hue picker, and I'm gonna just make that like a dark red so you can see it a little better. And then if I want to make adjustments to the stroke, I just click on the stroke here to change the color of the stroke. Just like with the fill, you double click the stroke, and then I could make this pink line. I can make it a bit bigger using the properties window and just make that bigger that way. Okay. And then I could turn that into a gradient stroke, which is weird, and I never use that. Or you could turn off the stroke again using that little tiny thing right there. Let me see if I can get my zoomy zoom. Nope. Zoomy. Oh, zoomy zoom. There you are. Yeah, so this is the area that I'm talking about. And see how the stroke color chip is overlapping the fill color chip, and that's why I was able to make adjustments to it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to a solid color fill, solid color stroke, and then I can swap the colors here. And remember, make the stroke thicker over here. Okay, cool. So we've talked about fill, we've talked about stroke, we've talked about paths. The path is basically just the container or shape that you make. So now we can actually start with our illustration process a little bit. Okay. Let's go to File menu. Let's go to New, and this time we're going to make a 5" by 5" little card. Okay, and this is kind of nice because with whatever you make here, you could print this out, and I'll show you how to do that, which is pretty fun. So I go over to Art and Illustration, and I'm going to go over to my trusty 1920 by 1080, and I'm going to change my width to inches, my units to inches. When you change it here, it changes for everything, and I'm just going to change my width to 5 and my height to 5. And I want just one artboard, and I'll explain to you what that means in a beat. Now, since this is supposedly for print, I'm going to use CMYK. Everything we're going to make here is going to be, what does it say? The chosen color is different. Yeah, fine. Okay. Everything we're going to make here is going to be black and white today, so I don't want you guys worrying about color just yet. All right, so I'm just going to hit create. It's coming. Wait for it. There we go. Hi. So now we're going to be able to make some shapes. The shapes that we're going to make have no stroke. So I'm going to click on the stroke chip and choose none. Then I'm going to click on the color chip in order to activate it and double click it in order to choose a color. And we're going to work with black. Okay. And if you have any questions, you can drop them into the chat. If you get lost and need me to repeat something, just drop that into the chat. Alternatively, if you are watching this after the fact and you get confused at a certain point, feel free to drop in the comments the specific thing that I was demonstrating and then ask a question about that, and I'll be happy to help you out. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the interface next. And with the interface, we have our tools on the left, we have our document in the middle. This is what we're looking at. And over here we have additional windows. Now I usually like to have the color window open. I think that's pretty nice. I like to have my layers always open and my properties always open. And what you might find is that if you click that little fast forward button, it will hide the window when you click away sometimes, so you can tear off the windows just by dragging like this. But I'm not going to do that because mine's behaving properly. Okay, now supposing you wanted to change your settings for the document, like you made the document and then you're like, oh no, I don't know if these are the right settings. You can change many of the settings by going over to this tool right here. And you see how when you have a tool hovered, like I just have my mouse hovered over that tool, it gives me information about it. So there we go. It says Artboard Tool, Shift O. And if I click on the Artboard Tool, and then I go over to my properties window, which remember gives us information about the thing, I can see that it is set to 5 inches in width by 5 inches in height. And if I click on Artboard options, I can change the settings here, okay? So I can change the width and height. I can choose to add a center mark if I want. I can add video safe areas. And if there's more than one artboard, so for instance, if you are working and you try to export something and it doesn't quite work right, like it's exporting the wrong size, or if you bring it into After Effects and it's coming in as like no pixels, it's sometimes because there's an extra artboard just hanging out to the side that you didn't know about. So if that happens to you, that it's like just funky when you try to export, print, or import into another program, just click on the little Artboard tool, come over to Artboard options, and down at the bottom, it'll tell you how many artboards you have, which is pretty cool. It says Artboards 2, okay? And depending on which artboard is selected, that will allow you to delete it, okay? So right now in the Artboard tool, I have artboard number 2 selected, but if I click on the edge of artboard 1 and I click on Artboard options, it gives me the option to delete artboard 1. Okay, so it tells me how many I have here, but in order to delete the one that you hate, you have to select it with the Artboard tool first and then do the options. Alternatively, you can do it right here in the properties window too. Just click on the delete artboard and now you're left with just the one. Okay, so this is actually an error that I found with some of the presets that come with Illustrator. Some of them come with like a secret extra artboard, which I think was unintentional. Anyways, so if there's any questions about artboards, please let me know. So let's talk about tools next. On the left-hand side, we have all of our tools. Now, I personally prefer to have my tools be what is called 2-up. And you can just, okay, maybe not with this app. That's like really short. So let me just double click this. So you can switch this from being like sticking like 2 across to 1 across just by clicking this little fast forward button. Many of the tools have a little arrow next to them, and if you click and hold it, you'll get other tool options. But these aren't all the tools that are available to you in Illustrator. If you want to add a tool, you can click on this 3-dot like to be continued button at the bottom of the toolbox, and that brings up Edit Toolbar. And this has lots more tools that you can just straight up add into your toolbox as needed. So for example, like if you wanted to use the free transform tool, you could just drag that over and plop it on top of whatever tool you want it to be grouped with. And then when you get out of the 3 dots, which you can do just by clicking the 3 dots again, you can come over to where that tool is and see now it's living at the bottom of the rotate tool area. Okay, so click and hold in order to get more tools up. Awesome. So those are our tools. The main tool that I am going to be working with today is the selection tool. We can also work with the direct selection tool. So I call these the black arrow and the white arrow. And the black arrow selection tool allows you to select the entire thing or a group of things, whereas the white tool, the direct selection tool, only allows you to select part of a thing. And it'll also show you your path points, okay? So if I take my rectangle tool and I make sure that my fill color is set to black, and I click on the stroke and make sure that's set to none, I can come over here and draw a square. If I want the square to stay proportional, I can hold the Shift key down, and that's going to keep it at a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay, so there's my square. With my selection tool, if I click off, then I can click back on it and see how it kind of gives me a little outliney thing around it. If I click on it, then I can move the whole entire thing. These points in the corners in Illustrator, they're called anchor points. The little roundy dots, those are called live corners. And if you create a shape that has sharp edges to it, you can pull the live corners to round the corners of your shape. I know, I love it. And then when you click off and then you're like, maybe that's too rounded, you can click back on it again. And as long as you didn't make like significant changes to that shape, you can reactivate those live corners and adjust the amount of the curvature. Now, one thing I want to bring to your attention, and this is especially for those of you who have some experience with Illustrator, if you create a box, see how it has just 4 points. If I take my roundy dots and I pull, I always call them roundy dots, they're live corners, and then I go back to the open arrow or direct selection tool, see how it added extra points? Now, those of us who've been using Illustrator for a minute, we generally, especially if we like the nice clean edge designs, prefer to have as few points as possible, because the less points you have, the smoother your edge ends up being. So this might bother you, okay? And if that bothers you, there are other ways of creating the rounded edge. But the cool thing about this, I think, is really just that you still have control over the amount of curvature, and it's exact. So each corner is getting the same amount of rounding. If you use the open arrow tool, you can select just 1 point or 1 corner, and see how that gave me just 1 live corner, and then I could adjust that one separately. Okay, or I could select 2. So click and shift drag. So I drew a little box around that corner, and then held shift and drew a box around this corner, and now I can round both of those together. Yeah, I know. Isn't that so cool? That's like one of the coolest things that Illustrator has brought up in recent history. And see, I still have the live corner for that one, but unless I specifically highlight the corner itself, it's going to adjust all the corners at once. All right, cool. So that's a little bit about the live corners. There's lots more that you could learn about live corners, but we're going to leave it at that. I'm going to take my black selection tool and just hover inside that shape, click it, and hit the delete key. Okay, so we've learned about making squares and using live corners. What if you want to make other shapes? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Click and hold the rectangle tool and you have other tool options. You have, for example, the ellipse tool. If you take the ellipse tool and you draw an ellipse and then hold the shift key down, it's going to keep it proportional. And now this is a perfect circle, as opposed to if I just kind of went, then it makes an oval, also known as an ellipse. That's the fancy word for oval. Then if you click and hold, you can get to the polygon tool. And the polygon tool is pretty cool. If you pull it just as is, it's going to come at some wackadoodle angle. But if you hold the shift key while you pull, it's going to keep it at like a flat angle, which is kind of nice. Now, in addition to that, okay, so I'm pulling that. If you're pulling your shape, and I have to use 2 hands for this. So I'm pulling my shape with my mouse, and then I'm coming over to my other side where my arrow keys are. You can use your up arrow to add more sides to your polygon. I know, isn't that so cool? Alternatively, you can push the down arrow, so now it's a septagon, has 7 sides. You can use the down arrow key until you end up with a triangle. I know, also really cool. So supposing you made a triangle and then you held the shift key after you did the arrow thing, then it would allow you to make that bigger or smaller, but it keeps the baseline flat. Okay, so that was so much fun. I'm going to do it again. So I pull, and it always defaults to the last shape that you made. So just keep in mind, arrow up in order to get more sides. And then as you pull and get it bigger, if you hold the shift key down, it's going to keep it flat. All right, fun. Okay, so then, as if that weren't enough, we also have our star tool. And with the star tool, if you pull it and you do the arrow up, it adds more points to your star. If you do the arrow down, it'll give you fewer points to your star. Okay, the default is a 5-pointed star. And then again, if you increase the number of points using your arrows and dragging, I'm not letting go of my mouse this whole time. If I hold the shift key, then again, it's going to just end up flat. All right. So if you want to reset it, just pull it and do the arrows down until you end up with 5 again. Yay, happy. So that's kind of fun. Now, supposing you made a shape like this and you were like, oh, if only there were roundy dots that oh, how did that happen? So if you want to round stuff that's sharp edged, all you have to do is hit the A key on your keyboard and it'll show you all of the live corner possibilities, which is so cool. So check this out. What I can do is take that open arrow, drag a little box around each of my points, and I'm holding the shift key to get more of these points in on the action. And those of you who like florals might appreciate this. If I take this live corner and pull it, look at that. It made it rounded. Okay. And then you could, you know, make that bigger or smaller, whatever you wanted. If I use my white arrow tool to shift select all these guys, then I could come over here and grab up that free transform that I just selected. Let's see if that actually pulls. Yep. If you use that free transform and you hold Option and Shift, it'll let you scale just some of the points. So I'm just scaling the middle points. So again, that tool that I accessed, I found it by clicking on the 3 dots at the bottom of the toolbar. And then I went to Free Transform tool and I dragged and dropped it on top of my Rotate tool. So that gave me extra options. So that's kind of a fun shape, right? I like it. And then, you know, of course I could continue by adding more stuff to it. Okay. So we got to move on, friends. I know that was so much fun stuff. I'm sure you want to play with it, but you can play with it later. All right. So we talked about making shapes. Let me talk about deleting stuff. So if you have a shape and you don't like it, use that black arrow tool, click on it and hit the delete or backspace key and that'll get rid of it. Next, we want to talk about snapping. When you make stuff in Illustrator, it likes to snap to things. Like you'll see these kind of pink lines show up. So if I go over to the view menu and you go to snaps, either snap to grid, pixel, point, glyph, I'm just going to use the smart guides, which allows things to snap to each other. Okay? I like the smart guides. So, making shapes, layers, group. Okay. So when you have multiple shapes and you want them to interact with each other, they need to be on the same layer together. Okay, so when you create the shapes, they end up on a layer, and you, unlike other programs, you can have multiple things on one layer. Now, if you're preparing this file for After Effects, you don't want the layers to, like, you don't want all your paths on one layer, because then you won't be able to animate them on separate layers, because all that After Effects recognizes is your topmost layer. Okay, so just be mindful of how you're prepping your artwork. If you're using this for After Effects, also you wouldn't use CMYK, you would use RGB. You can always switch between your color spaces by going to the File menu, Document Color Mode, and switching over to RGB that way. Okay, so that's another thing to kind of keep in mind. All right, so we have our paths right here. If you wanted to make more layers, you can go down at the bottom and, oh, it's hidden behind my image. Let me pull this up. Down at the bottom here, I can create a new layer, and a new layer will allow me to draw more shapes on it, and you get a little preview in this thumbnail. Okay, this red outline that you're seeing, don't let it bother you. It's just the color of the path. like identifying the shape of the container, it is not identifying what's inside of it. So imagine it's like red Tupperware. It doesn't mean that your pasta has turned red. You're just dealing with red Tupperware. So if you just hold the command or command on a Mac, control on a PC, and click off, it'll show you what the actual thing is. Okay, now again, if I want these shapes to interact with each other, they all need to be on the same layer together. So I would have to swivel this open, select both of these guys, and drag them down into the same layer together. In addition, you can change their order. So I'm just going to change these guys' colors so that you can see this a little bit better. This one is going to be blue, this one. I'm just using my color picker here to randomly select colors to help identify these against each other. Oh, that's kind of pretty. All right, so anyways, you can change the order just by dragging in between. Alternatively, you can right click and you can, is that right? Yeah, right click with the selection tool. You can go to arrange and you can choose whether you want it to come to the front, send it backward one click, bring it forward one click, or send it all the way back. So if you've ever used Canva, there's a similar thing in Canva under arrange. So I could bring this all the way to the front. I could bring this guy back, like if I just bring this over here, okay, I could bring this back one click just by going to arrange, send backward, and it just brought it below the blue. Okay, so that's a little bit about arranging your layers. All right, so all right, I have only 2 bullet points left for today, and those 2 bullet points are pretty thick. So you ready for this? I like this. I'm gonna keep it. So I'm gonna make a new document, and that's another thing I just want to say. This is like a life lesson from years of working in graphic design and motion design and animation. Try not to obsess over any one thing if you're trying to improve your skills in that category. So I'm trying to improve my skills in Illustrator, let's say, rather than just working on one illustration or one graphic design and just like get that to be perfect. Make lots of them and try to make them as quickly as you can so that then you can look back at the whole range of things you've made and then refine the ones that are actually working. So for example, if your client or if your instructor is asking you for just one project, don't just do the one project or don't just do the one design. Explore a bunch of different ones and do them quickly and then decide which one you're going to refine. And I'm telling you, you will get good so much faster than if you just do the one thing and just try to make that perfect. Okay. That's my advice. Take it with a grain of salt. That might or might not work for you specifically, but it's definitely worked for me. All right. Excellent. So I'm going to do another new document, and see it says recent. It says your recent items, art and illustration 5x5. Let's do this. Okay. Awesome. And I'm going to save this again. I didn't save the last one. And I'm going to call this comp work, because I'm making a comp or a composition, and this is my working file. So I just put underscore work. When I'm ready to animate it, like when it's all separated out into the requisite layers, then I would do underscore anim. But for now, we're just going to do underscore work. Okay, so here's where those files that I shared with you guys on Google Drive come in handy. And that link is in the description for this video, and it's a bit.ly link, okay? It's like not very far into the actual description. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna place the image into this. Now here's where people get confused. They think that they can open a JPEG image in Illustrator and then add layers to it. The problem is that Illustrator kind of loses its mind if you do that. So rather than opening the JPEG through Illustrator, here's what you do. you have your new document that you made in Illustrator, and then you go to File, Place, okay? And then from the place thingy, you go and identify your image that you're going to be bringing in. So I have my image that I'm going to be bringing in right here, and I'm just going to hit Place, and it gives me this funky cursor with a little preview of the thing I'm about to place. Now, when you're pulling this cursor, look, Ma, no hands. When you're pulling this cursor, make sure that you don't hold the Shift key down. So if you're used to Photoshop, you might be like, yeah, you got to hold the Shift key down. Otherwise, it's not going to stay proportional. Well, when you're doing place, you don't hold the Shift key down. So I'm just going to go over to the corner of the image, the corner of my comp, that is, and I'm just pulling. Now suppose you pulled and then you accidentally let go your mouse, or you change your mind later on. Easy enough to fix. Make sure you have your selection tool chosen, and then watch. This is a two-handed operation. As you pull the corner, hold the Shift key down, and that will keep it proportional. So for place, you don't hold Shift, but for the selection tool scaling, you do hold Shift. Okay? So this is what I call the cheap lightbox method. And in the cheap lightbox method, what I do is I take my drawing, I reduce its opacity, and then I put that on top of any artwork that I'm going to make. Okay? So I'm going to reduce this layer's opacity. How do you do that? Well, introducing the belly button. So this little dot thing allows you to select your particular layer or path and so on. So if I click on that and then I go over to Properties, in the Properties area, there is an opacity section. You could actually click on the little arrow to the right of the opacity section and just drag it down. Okay, so now that's a lower opacity, which means that I'll be able to see any artwork that I create underneath of it. Okay, so in my Layers panel, I'm going to rename this Sketch. And I'm going to lock it. This way I don't accidentally create artwork on it. And what you'll notice is that if you only have a layer that's locked and you come over to the shape drawing tool, it gives you this pencil with the no smoking sign next to it. And that just means you can't draw on this, friend, and you figure out why. It's not going to tell you. So I was hoping that that actually would expand my mouse, but it didn't. It just expanded the artwork. Anyways, make a new layer down here at the bottom of your Layers panel. And then you're going to take that new layer and drag it below. Okay? And I can rename this Design. And next I'm going to show you this really cool tool that I discovered. And I can't remember it offhand, so I have to look at my notes. I write everything down. If I don't write it down, I forget everything. Where is it? Shaper Tool. Okay, so I learned this from my buddy Amy. And the Shaper Tool is like autocorrect for bad drawings. Oh, I'm so excited about this. In order to access the Shaper Tool, you do Shift-N. As in, nothing can stop me, okay? I can't think of anything better. Anyways, so with the Shaper Tool, if you have a blank layer selected, and let's just make, yeah, we don't even need to choose a fill and stroke. If we just go around and like try to trace this circle, and I'm just doing it with my mouse. That's my excuse for not drawing well. And then I release. It made a perfect circle for me. How nice is that? That was so fun. I'm going to do it again. So I'm just going to draw a circle, and it's going to be terrible. And it's just like autocorrect. And that was Shift-N in order to get it. Okay? I love it. So now we can actually change that into a real shape. So I can click on this path, and I want this. I have to check my finish. My finished version, yeah, it's black on top and white on the bottom. So I need this to be, well, let's make it black. So I can go over to my color picker, I can swap my fill and stroke, and then click on the stroke to turn it off. Okay, so for now, I'm just gonna make each of my shapes in one color, and then we're going to do all the inversions and stuff later on. So I have that circle, and then I'm going to take my rectangle tool and I'm going to draw this rectangle. I need another rectangle here. I need these to be small rectangles, but they're going to be based on the same thing. So I'm going to show you something nice. Here I've drawn this rectangle. If I take the selection tool and I hold the Option or Alt key, it's going to make a duplicate. And if I have those smart guides on, it will like tell me when I'm aligned to stuff. So if I wanted it to be aligned to the edge of that circle that I just drew, I could. So I want this one to be here, and then Option drag again, and here's where it gets cool. You see those little pink lines that just showed up? It's showing me that these are equidistant, okay? Now, if this were a real project for a client, I would probably also measure the distance between each of these to make sure that that was the same, but that's okay. This is good enough. Now, supposing we wanted to make these guys thinner, you would click on one and shift click, holding shift and clicking. That allows me to select more than one. If I go over to the properties and I go over here where it has width and height, I want to make the height thinner, all right? And if I go over here and I change the height, let's say to 0.3, you see how they all shrunk and then the distance between them shrunk and it just made like a hot mess? So that's not ideal. But if you click on these one at a time and you go over here and you just do the height, and I'm going to just change this height to like 0.04, that made it thinner. And then I can go over here and make this 0.04, and then this one also. That did not work. Why didn't it work? Hold on. Yep, it didn't take. Sometimes it doesn't take, and then you have to do it again. There we are. And then this final one is already 0.4. Okay, fabulous. So now I have all of my main like component pieces here, and I can start kind of slicing and dicing them. Okay, so I want this stick to be broken up based on this rectangle. And whenever you're going to slice and dice, you got to duplicate, okay? So I'm going to take this rectangle and I'm going to duplicate it, but I don't want to move it. I want to keep it exactly where it is. So there's two ways you can do that. One would be to click the belly button and the layer, and then just go to the edit menu and do copy and then paste in place. Okay, so that's one way to do it. I call that longhand. So yeah, paste in place. The other way you can do it is by taking your shape that you want to duplicate and simply dragging and dropping it to the new layer icon here. So now I have two of those. Okay, so now I can select one of them. See how I clicked off? Select one of those, shift select my stick, and then I can break them up so that I can do different things with them. And that's where the Pathfinder window comes in, okay? So I'm going to turn off the visibility of everything else, including my sketch, but not my design. See how you can turn off the visibility of the whole layer and then you can't see anything? You have to turn on the visibility of the layer, and you can actually turn on and off the paths within. Okay, so click and shift click. So this is the Pathfinder window, and there's lots of different modes, and I recommend that you try these out and just see which ones you like. So there's Unite, there's minus the front. So this one, it just like cut off whatever was in the front, and I'm just undoing each time. Here it just shows me what overlapped. This one was called intersect. This one's going to exclude that top, but that's not really friendly for revision or animation, so I'm going to undo that. And then down here we have other ones. So we have trim, so that just trimmed off the top part of the rectangle so that it's like separated from the rest. So if I just click that guy on its own, see that? It's separated from the rest, undoing. But the one that we're gonna use is called divide. I really like divide because it actually like cuts everything. It's like it's making a puzzle out of whatever you have selected. Okay, now the problem with the Pathfinder is that it always groups your stuff. So you have to ungroup it. A group basically means that it's a bunch of stuff put together that when you move it, it moves together. And when you change things about it, they change together too. So I'm going to ungroup this, and we're probably going to go a few minutes over, like maybe about 10 minutes over. So just wanted to let you know that. So to ungroup, you're going to go to the object menu and you're going to go to ungroup. Okay. So now I can turn on and off the visibility to see what each of these things are. So I have this weird shape that has this cutout. I don't actually need that anymore because remember we duplicated the rectangle. So I can select the belly button and the path and just hit the backspace or delete key, or I can just click on that thing and hit delete. Okay, so then we have our top piece and our bottom piece, and then we have our original rectangle. So I'm going to take my top piece and I'm going to turn that, wait, I need to check my finish. And actually, let me just move that finish over so it's going to be on this side so I can just reference what that's supposed to look like in the end. Brilliant. You can also hold the space bar when you're in any tool to access the hand tool, and that can be kind of nice. So moving this over, and I'm going to do Control minus to zoom out. And right here, I'm going to hold the space bar to shove this over a little bit. And I'm going to move the Pathfinder down below. Okay, this way I can see all the things that I need. And I don't actually need my color window, so I can close that. And I don't need my gradient window, so I can close that. I'm just closing using a little X. Okay, so I actually need my rectangle back here to be white eventually. And I want like a whole thing in the back that's black. So while we're in black, let's take our rectangle tool and make the whole background black. And remember, I can take my selection tool and then right click, go to arrange and choose send back. So that's my black background. And then I can click on this rectangle here and I can change its color. Just by clicking on the fill, it brings up the color window, and look at this. They have like shortcut keys at the bottom. I love it. So you can just click on that and it changes that to being white. Nice. Okay, so then we want this little piece, and see how I'm just hovering with that black selection tool? I can change that little piece also to white. So I have like the right hand side of this composition pretty much done. These rectangles all need to be white as well, but notice when I click and shift click on just the layer names, I end up not actually selecting them over here. But if you click and shift click the little belly buttons, it selects all of them. Okay, so click and shift click the belly buttons, and then I can make those be white. All right, next we want to work with our circle, and if I click on each of these paths, it's going to tell me what each of them are. And see, my ellipse was turned off. So I'm going to take my ellipse and drag it up, okay, and turn on my sketch again. And I can see from the sketch and my finished product that I want the bottom part of the circle to be white. So once again, I need to take that top rectangle and duplicate it. So I'm going to drag and drop it down, okay, and I'm going to turn off the duplicate. And we actually have a layer that's called ellipse, thank you. And I'm just going to turn off anything that I don't need for this particular operation. So now I have my circle and I have my background, my circle and my rectangle copied, okay? But I don't actually need this to be cut here. I want it to be cut where my sketch is. See that little slot? So let's just move this. We're gonna move this upward. And through trial and error, I discovered that I can't actually do this design exactly in pure black and white and have it make sense. So I had to adjust it. You see that the slot is actually just a line. So I'm gonna move this. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. And now I have my circle and I have this shape, and I'm gonna divide them again. So I bring up my Pathfinder and I'm gonna divide, select, object, ungroup, okay? So now I have the top part of my circle and the bottom part of my circle. The bottom part of my circle needs to be white, so I can go to my color picker and choose white again. Okay, and then here we have our like white broken up path. Let me show you. See how it has like a gap in it? I don't need that anymore. So what happened was when I did the divide, it broke it up into 3 pieces. So you can really see it if I hit A for open arrow, you can see what these different pieces are. So we have the top of the circle, we have the bottom of the circle, and we have the rectangle with the circle cut out. We don't need the rectangle with the circle cut out anymore, so I can actually just click on it, click on the little belly button and hit the backspace or delete key. Okay, so now here's my top little rectangle, and notice I am going outside of the zone of my trim. That's okay. And then here's my stick, here's my other stick, I have my 3 rectangles here, and I need to bring those up because they are hiding. And why are they hiding? Oh, visibility. There we go. So now we have the visibility, we can see those. So I need to add a few finishing touches to this and then get this ready to print. So the finishing touches are really just to add some lines. So if I come over here to my shape drawing tool, I can choose the line segment tool. Okay, and the line segment tool uses a stroke. It doesn't use a fill. So you would need to swap your fill and stroke, or make sure that your fill is set to nothing. Click on the stroke, and then to change that to being black, come over to your color window and click the black chip. Okay, and again, I always make sure that I click off of everything. So if you're seeing weird things happening in your viewer, it's because you forgot to click off. Just undo a couple times and you should be okay. All right, so now I'm going to draw that line going across, and because in my view menu I turned on smart guides, it's going to snap to the things that I already have on screen. Okay, so I'm going to click and pull and see it's snapping to the stuff that's already there. Okay, if I hold the command key on a Mac or control key on a PC and click off, now you can see that line show up. Next, I want to make a slightly smaller line here. So I'm just going to click and pull. So click and drag across to there, and then command or control click off. Okay, let's zoom in and take a look at that area. Okay, and I can see that it's not quite even. So if I click on that path with my selection tool, I can actually use my arrow keys on my keyboard, left and right, to just shift it over a little bit. Okay, so now we have our little slot there, and I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so just a couple more things and then we'll be finished, all right? So if you want to just show this as its finished product and you don't want to see all the stuff hanging off the edges, you have to change that in the view menu. So you would just go to the view menu and choose trim view, and it just cuts off all that extra stuff. Another thing, if you wanted to round anything, you would need to go into your stroke panel, and you could do it there. Now these guys here, you can't round them in their current state because they are fills, not strokes. Okay, so if you wanted to be able to round the ends of these, the easiest way to do that would be to redraw them using the line tool instead of the rectangle tool. Let me show you what I mean by rounding, and it's probably best demonstrated if I just make this line a bit thicker just for now. And again, I am going a little bit over, and I'm sorry, but I'll, yeah, at the most, we're going to go like another 5 minutes, I think. So if I take this line and I go to Window, Stroke, and that's not the whole story, friends. If I take this window and I click the little hamburger next to it, probably hard to see, there we go. Click the little hamburger next to it, choose Show Options. Then you can change how this stroke displays. So I could give it a round cap. And if I click off, look, It's a round friendly cap. Unlike our live corners, you can't adjust how rounded it is, but that is pretty nice, okay? And if you have corners, like for example, I'm just gonna draw like something quick here. So by default, it's like going to that rounded end path because that's what I just set in the stroke window. But if I wanted the corners to also be rounded, I would click on that and I would go to the corner section, which says round join. And now we have that with the nice rounded corners and ends. Okay, so again, in order to get that, when you first bring up your stroke window, it doesn't show it. It's just tiny like this. But if you click and to show options, then it'll show you all the extras. Okay, this is also how you would make arrows. So right here, I'm gonna make this back to whatever this size was. So I'm just gonna click on this lower line here. Let me close the stroke window. I clicked on the lower line. My properties window tells me that the stroke is 1 pixel. And now I can come over here and I can say stroke 1 pixel. And then I can also click that word stroke. Ooh, that's a fun way to just automatically access your stroke window, and I can change the cap back to a butt cap. That's what it means when it's squared at the end. Awesome. So this guy is ready to print, but if I printed this on paper, what would happen is that this white area would just kind of bleed off, and I'm not that good with scissors. So what I would suggest is that in your layers, let's just lock the design so we don't screw it up and make a new layer and just put a black and white box on it, meaning just like an outline. All right, so I did my default colors with nothing selected. So nothing selected, default colors, no filling, just a stroke. And then with my rectangle tool, which remember lives with the circle and the line segment, and then I can come over here and draw my box, and just with those smart guides, let it snap to the edges of your document. And then when I do my file print, I can tell it to print like on my letter size piece of paper, not to scale it. You know, I'm just gonna do 1 copy and don't scale. And if I want it to be vertical, I would do it like this. But if I want to have it be the other way around, media size, I would have to change the orientation of the paper. Okay. Oh, so letter size, and see, I could just choose like a different paper orientation. So this is going to be better because then it's going to be wide, and wide looks nice with a square, I think. But again, it totally depends on what you want in terms of your printing. And for my print, I would have to make sure my printer's on, of course, so that I would hit print and we would be happy. All right, so that about wraps it up for today's session. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned a lot of things in Illustrator. And if you make something that's based on what you learned here, I would really appreciate it if you would tag me on Instagram. It's @KalikaFX on Instagram. I'm also on Twitter @KalikaFX, and that's just letter F, letter X. And on Facebook, I'm KalikaFX Training. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing and tell your friends. Like if you have a friend who is like struggling with Illustrator or interested in learning it, please forward them the link to this video so that they can learn it too. And let me see, what else? Am I missing anything? Oh yeah, I have live streams like 3 times a week right now. I do them on Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern time. I do them on Tuesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And I do them, and those are both the Getting Started With series. So like Getting Started with Illustrator, Getting Started with Photoshop, and different like little projects that we can make as we're getting started with these different softwares. And I cover Photoshop, After Effects, Illustrator, Premiere. And then on Monday nights, I have the fun techniques. So those are more geared toward like if you want to see what else you can do with a thing. They tend to be animation based. Sometimes it's broken up, like one week we do design and another week we do animation. So those are on Monday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And you can see the whole schedule. I'll put that in the description as well. All right. Well, I hope you have a fantastic day. Please reach out to me if you have any questions about this tutorial or if you have suggestions for future tutorials. And I hope I'll see you soon. All right. Bye.